Commander Vex Organic, eye widened while his mechanical one zoomed in on Zara's face. What he saw there made him unconsciously reach for the weapon at his hip. This wasn't a traumatized refugee. This was something far more dangerous. Korax found his voice first. Impossible. No human could move that fast. You cheated somehow. Zara's smile grew colder. Cheated? By studying your anatomy? By learning your weaknesses? By preparing for combat instead of posturing like a peacock with anger management issues? She tilted her head slightly. If that's cheating, then every victory you've ever claimed was handed to you by opponents who were too polite to try. The Zenthri warrior's scales bristled with rage. You insignificant little. Careful, Zara interrupted, her voice still quiet, but carrying new undertones that made several cadets step backward. You're about to say something that might hurt my feelings. And you really don't want to see what happens when my feelings get hurt. Threx uncrossed his forearms, his own stance shifting into something more combative. Big words from someone who got lucky against a slow opponent. Zara's green eyes shifted to the Vorthan warrior. The temperature in the arena seemed to drop several degrees. Lucky. She looked down at the still unconscious Gorth, then back at Threx. Want to test that theory? The challenge hung in the air like a loaded weapon. The other cadets watched with the fascination of spectators at a gladiatorial match, unsure whether they were about to witness another impossible upset or the humans' inevitable comeuppance. Commander Vex raised his hand. That's enough for today. Medical team, attend to Cadet Gorth. Everyone else dismissed. But nobody moved. The tension in the arena was too thick. The implications of what they had just witnessed too significant. A human had defeated one of their strongest warriors in less than 30 seconds, using techniques that suggested knowledge and experience far beyond anything taught in academy courses. Zara walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As she passed Korax, she paused just long enough to speak without looking at him. Oh, and Korax, tomorrow's scenario training includes zero-gravity combat. You might want to practice moving in 3 dimensions instead of just talking in one. She continued walking, leaving behind an arena full of warriors who were suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew about humans, about combat, and about the quiet girl who had just announced herself as a threat they had never seen coming. As the arena doors closed behind her, Zara finally allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 3 months of insults, 3 months of condescension, 3 months of being treated like a charity case. Tomorrow, she decided, would be even more educational. The pendant against her chest seemed to pulse with warmth. 30,000 souls demanded justice, and justice, Zara had learned, was best served with a side of absolute shock and overwhelming force. The other cadets were about to discover that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make sure their enemies never forgot the experience. Hashtag the human girl was silent in combat class, then dropped the apex warrior. Without blinking, HFY. The zero-gravity combat chamber hummed with electromagnetic field generators as Zara floated in the center of the sphere, her body perfectly still in the absence of gravity. Around her, the other cadets struggled with basic 3-dimensional movement, their natural instincts betraying them in the weightless environment. Pathetic, she murmured, watching Korax flail helplessly as he spun out of control after attempting a simple directional change. You'd think apex predators would adapt faster. It had been exactly 24 hours since her encounter with Gorth, and the atmosphere in the academy had shifted dramatically. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Training partners were mysteriously unavailable when her name appeared on assignment lists. The quiet human had become something far more unsettling, an unknown variable in a carefully calculated system. Commander Vex's voice crackled through the chamber's communication system. Today's exercise simulates combat aboard a disabled starship. No gravity, limited maneuverability, obstacles throughout the environment. Your objective is simple: survive and eliminate your opponents. Threx managed to stabilize himself against a floating debris panel, his forearms giving him a slight advantage in the weightless environment. This time will be different. Human, zero gravity is the natural environment of void-born warriors like myself. Zara rotated slowly to face him, her movement so controlled it seemed almost supernatural. Void-born? Is that what you call spending your childhood in orbital stations with artificial gravity and safety protocols? Her voice carried mock curiosity. How adorable. You think that makes you dangerous in real space. You know nothing about real space combat, snarled Jex, the Kytherian assassin using her species' natural magnetism to cling to a metal beam. Assassination in zero gravity requires years of training. Assassination, Zara repeated thoughtfully, such a clinical word. Do you know what we called it when the mining consortium destroyed our colony's ship? We called it murder. 30,000 people. Gone, while corporate executives calculated profit margins. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the generators. This was the first time Zara had spoken about her past, and the raw emotion in her voice made several cadets uncomfortable. But murder is such an ugly word, she continued, her tone shifting to something almost conversational. So let me teach you about something prettier. Let me teach you about justice. The training scenario activated. Suddenly, the chamber filled with floating debris, spinning obstacles, and simulated weapon fire. The cadets scattered, each seeking cover and advantageous positions. In the chaos of the initial moments, Zara simply disappeared. Where did she go? Nira called out, her crystalline form reflecting the emergency lighting as she sought cover behind a tumbling piece of hull plating. The answer came from directly behind Korax. Right here, Zara said softly. The Zen-3 warrior spun around, his reflexes impressive even in zero gravity. But Zara was already moving, using his own rotation to add momentum to her strike. Her knee connected with his floating ribs, and the sound of cracking bone echoed through the chamber. Impossible! Korax gasped, struggling to breathe. You can't move that fast in zero gravity without propulsion. Zara's smile was predatory. Can I? Maybe the problem isn't human limitations. Maybe the problem is your assumptions. She pushed off his chest, sending him spinning away while she controlled her own trajectory with minute adjustments. See, you all think zero gravity is about floating around helplessly. But real space combat isn't about fighting gravity's absence. It's about using momentum, angles, and physics as weapons. The combat arena fell silent as Zara walked through the reinforced doors. Every pair of eyes in the massive training facility turned toward the small human figure, her worn combat boots making soft clicking sounds against the polished metal floor. The silence wasn't respectful. It was a kind of silence that screamed mockery. Oh, look what crawled out of the ventilation system, sneered Korax, a 7-foot-tall Zen-3 warrior whose scales gleamed like black diamonds under the arena's harsh lighting. His voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never tasted defeat. The little pet human thinks she belongs with real fighters. Zara didn't respond. She never did. Her green eyes swept across the assembled warriors from 12 different species, each one built for destruction, each one looking at her like she was a cosmic joke. The Galactic Combat Academy had accepted exactly one human into their elite program, and that human stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighed maybe 130 pounds, soaking wet, and hadn't spoken a single word during combat training in 3 months. Maybe she's mute, suggested Threx, a Vorthan whose forearms rippled with enough muscle to crush steel beams. His mandibles clicked with amusement. Or maybe humans just don't have the brain capacity for tactical communication. The other cadets laughed. The sound echoed to the cavernous arena like the howling of predators who had cornered wounded prey. Zara's expression remained completely neutral. She walked to her assigned position in the training circle, ignoring the whispers that followed her like poisonous smoke. Commander Vex, a battle-scarred Cronin with cybernetic implants covering half his face, stepped into the center of the arena. His mechanical eye whirred as it focused on the assembled warriors. Today's exercise is simple. Combat scenarios. Real-world situations. Defeat or be defeated. The weak will be eliminated from the program. Zara's fingers unconsciously moved to the small pendant hanging around her neck. Hidden beneath her training suit, it was the only reminder she carried home. Of Earth. Of the colony ship Meridian that no longer existed except in her nightmares. The first match began. 2 draconian warriors faced off in a display of raw power that shook the arena floor. Claws met armor in showers of sparks. The crowd of cadets cheered and analyzed every move. Combat was entertainment for most of these species. For Zara, it was something else entirely. Pathetic technique, commented Jex, a Kytherian assassin whose purple skin seemed to absorb light. Humans probably fight with sticks and stones on their little mudball planet. Actually, said Nira, a celestial engineer whose crystalline features caught the light beautifully, I heard their homeworld was destroyed. Something about a mining accident. Her tone carried mock sympathy. How tragic. No wonder she's so quiet. Probably traumatized. Zara's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The pendant felt heavier against her chest. Colony ship Meridian. 30,000 souls. Gone in an instant because someone decided human lives were expendable obstacles to profit. The matches continued. Each fight was a brutal display of alien combat prowess. Korax demolished a Forge-born warrior with contemptuous ease. Threx systematically dismantled 2 opponents simultaneously. The message was clear. This was a league of apex predators, and humans didn't belong. When do we get to see the pepper form? Korax called out, his reptilian eyes fixed on Zara with predatory hunger. I'm curious to see what passes for combat skill among the livestock species. Commander Vex Mechanical, I swiveled toward Zara. Cadet Chen, you're up next. The arena fell silent again. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The humans' inevitable humiliation. Zara stood slowly, her movements fluid and precise. She walked toward the combat circle with the same measured pace she always maintained. Oh, this should be entertaining, Threx rumbled, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. How long do you think she'll last? I'm betting 30 seconds before she surrenders. 20 seconds, countered Jex. Humans have no warrior culture. They're soft. Zara reached the edge of the combat circle and stopped. Her opponent stepped forward. Gorith, a Titanite gladiator whose stone-like skin had been forged in the volcanic pits of Molter Prime. 8 feet tall, weighing close to half a ton, with fists that could punch through starship hulls. He looked down at Zara like she was an insect that had wandered into his path. This is insulting, Gorith rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. I don't fight children. For the first time in 3 months, Zara spoke. Her voice was quiet, steady, and carried an edge that made several cadets take an involuntary step backward. Good, she said, because I don't fight fair. The arena erupted in surprised murmurs. The human could speak, and there was something in her tone that didn't match her small frame or quiet demeanor, something that made the hair on the back of necks stand up across multiple species. Commander Vex raised his hand for silence. Combat parameters. No weapons, no protective gear, no assistance. Victory by submission, unconsciousness, or inability to continue. Begin when ready. Gorith cracked his massive knuckles, the sound like breaking rocks. I'll try to make this quick, little human. No point in prolonging your embarrassment. Zara didn't respond. She simply took a combat stance that looked wrong. Not wrong in technique, but wrong in the way it seemed to promise violence far beyond what her frame should have been capable of delivering. Her green eyes had gone completely cold. Look at her posture, whispered Nira to the cadet beside her. That's not academy training. The observation was correct. Zara's stance belonged in darker places than training academies. It belonged in the corridors of dying starships, in the ruins of colonies, in the spaces where survival was measured in heartbeats and hesitation meant death. Gorith charged forward with surprising speed for his size. His massive fist swung toward Zara's head with enough force to shatter concrete. The watching cadets expected to see the human crumple instantly. Instead, Zara wasn't there anymore. She had moved with liquid precision, slipping under Gorith's guard like smoke through fingers. Her elbow struck the nerve cluster behind his knee, a target so specific that only someone with intimate knowledge of Titanite anatomy could have found it. Gorith's leg buckled. What? He started to say. Zara's palm strike caught him in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, her knee connected with his descending chin. The impact sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil. The 8-foot gladiator crashed to the arena floor unconscious. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't mockery or anticipation. This was shock, so complete that several cadets forgot to breathe. Zara stood over Gortha's motionless form, not even breathing hard. She looked up at the stunned faces surrounding the combat circle, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Anyone else have comments about livestock species?" she asked softly. Threx launched himself toward her, all four arms extended like the limbs of some massive spider. His approach was aggressive, powerful, and completely predictable. Zara waited until the last possible moment, then twisted aside while grabbing his leading arm. His own momentum became his enemy as she redirected his mass into a spinning tumble that sent him crashing into the chamber wall. "Physics lesson number 1, she called out cheerfully. "In space, everything that moves stays moving until something stops it. And I'm very good at being the thing that stops movement." Jex materialized from the shadows, her natural camouflage making her nearly invisible among the floating debris. Her strike was precise, professional, aimed at the nerve cluster that would paralyze Zara's left side. It was the kind of attack that had ended dozens of lives in the Kytherian's career. It connected with empty air. Zara had somehow sensed the attack coming, and rolled away at the exact moment the strike should have landed. "Nice technique," she said, now floating upside down relative to the assassin. Very textbook, very predictable, very disappointing. Before Jex could respond, Zara's counterattack began. Not the wild flailing of someone fighting in an unfamiliar environment, but the calculated precision of someone who had learned combat in the hardest school imaginable, survival. Her palm strike caught Jex in the sternum, disrupting the assassin's breathing. A follow-up elbow to the temple left the Kytherian floating unconscious among the debris. "Two down," Zara announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Who's next?" The remaining cadets had watched their strongest fighters fall with disturbing ease. Now they faced a terrible realization. The quiet human wasn't just competent in zero gravity. She was superior to them in every measurable way. "How?" Nero whispered, her crystalline features reflecting genuine fear. "How can you move like that?" Zara's expression softened slightly. "You want to know how? Fine. I'll tell you exactly how." She pushed off a floating beam, her trajectory perfectly calculated to bring her to the center of the chamber. "When I was 12 years old, my family was aboard the colony ship Meridian. We were heading to a new world, carrying 30,000 people who wanted nothing more than a chance to build something beautiful. The chamber had gone completely quiet. Even the unconscious cadets seemed to be listening. The Hegemony Mining Consortium decided our route interfered with their asteroid extraction operations, so they planted explosive charges on our ship's hull. Not enough to destroy us instantly, you understand. That would have been merciful. Just enough to breach the compartment slowly, so we have time to suffer." Zara's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had gone absolutely cold. "Do you know what it's like to watch your parents die in vacuum? To feel the air being sucked out of your lungs while you're trying to seal emergency bulkheads? To spend 6 months floating in a damaged ship, living on recycled air and protein paste, watching people die one by one?" The floating debris around her seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "I learned zero-gravity combat because I had to. I learned to fight in 3 dimensions because there was no other choice. I learned to use momentum and physics as weapons because conventional weapons were luxuries I couldn't afford." Her smile returned, but it was the most terrifying expression the cadets had ever seen. "I learned to be efficient because every wasted movement, every inefficient technique, every moment of hesitation meant someone else would die." She spread her arms wide, her body perfectly balanced in the weightless environment. "So when you ask how I can move like this, the answer is simple. I didn't learn to fight in comfortable training facilities with safety protocols and medical teams standing by. I learned to fight in the dark, in the cold, in the vacuum of space, with the screams of dying children echoing through the corridors." The silence that followed was profound. Several of the remaining cadets were openly staring at her with expressions of horror and respect. "But here's the really interesting part," Zara continued, her tone shifting back to something almost conversational. 6 months after Meridian was destroyed, I was rescued by a galactic patrol vessel. The captain was very apologetic about the tragic accident that had befallen our colony ship. He explained that sometimes these things happen in the vastness of space. She began moving again, her trajectory bringing her closer to the remaining cadets. Except it wasn't an accident. The patrol ship's databases contained the mining consortium's communications, orders to eliminate human expansion into their territory, payment records for the sabotage operation, even video footage of the executives celebrating the successful pest control operation. Korax, still struggled with his injuries, managed to gasp out a question. What did you do? Zara's smile became genuinely warm for the first time. I studied. I trained. I prepared. I learned everything I could about combat, about tactics, about the weaknesses of every species in the known galaxy. And then I applied to the Galactic Combat Academy. Why? Nira asked, why come here? Because, Zara said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried clearly through the chamber, this academy trains the security forces for the major corporations, including the Hegemony Mining Consortium. And in 6 months, I'll graduate. I'll be assigned to a corporate security position. I'll have access to facilities, personnel records, and executive protection details. The implications hit the assembled cadets like a physical blow. This wasn't about proving human worth in combat. This was about positioning herself for revenge on a scale that would make galactic history. Your planning to Threx began. The artificial gravity slowly returned to the chamber. Zara landed gracefully on her feet, while the other cadets struggled to adjust to the changing conditions. She walked toward the exit, pausing only when Korax called out to her. Wait, the Zen-3 warrior said, struggling to stand. What makes you think you can take on an entire corporation? Even with your skills, you're just one person. Zara turned back to face him, and her expression was absolutely serene. You're right, I am just one person. But here's what you don't... I'm planning to graduate with honors, Zara interrupted sweetly. I'm planning to excel in my corporate security position. I'm planning to be the perfect employee right up until the moment I decide that the executives responsible for murdering 30,000 innocent people need to have a conversation about accountability. Commander Vex's voice crackled through the communication system. Training exercise concluded. All cadets report to medical evaluation. As to understand about humans, we don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for our families, our communities, our species. And when someone threatens those things, we don't just seek victory. She smiled one last time, and every cadet in the chamber felt a chill run down their spine. We seek extinction. Complete, total, absolute extinction of the threat. Not just the individuals responsible, but the entire system that made their actions possible. We don't just want justice. We want to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else, ever again. As she walked away, her footsteps echoing in the now quiet chamber, the remaining cadets exchanged glances filled with new understanding. They had thought they were training alongside a traumatized refugee. Instead, they had been sharing classes with the opening movement of what would become the most systematic dismantling of corporate power in galactic history. The human girl had been silent in combat class because she had been listening, learning, planning, and now her education was almost complete.